This podcast is brought to you by Wizard.ai.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the iAnalysis podcast.
It's great to be here.
You know, we always have a lot of fun sort of dissecting the latest entertainment news and reviews.
Absolutely.
And today is no exception. We have a really interesting source to pull from, the Spur of the Moment podcast. It's more or less a free choice, which is on YouTube.
Always a good source of insightful commentary.
It is. They always have really interesting takes, so we thought we would sort of take a deep dive into what they were talking about recently and kind of give you the highlights.
Sounds like a plan.
So where do you even begin? I guess. Right at the top, movie news, like always. Right?
Always something brewing in the world of cinema.
Yeah, so they were talking about, of course, the Moana live-action movie, which is coming out.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be interesting.
And, of course, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is back as Maui, which is, not a surprise.
Makes sense, right? He's already proven himself in the role.
But they had an interesting detail.
Okay.
Apparently, he's going to be wearing a muscle suit.
A muscle suit. For The Rock.
That's what they said, and they were kind of like, well, his muscles are already, like, cartoonishly big,
Yeah, I mean, the guy is a walking muscle. So what's the point of the muscle suit?
And that kind of got them talking about the whole idea of live-action adaptations in general. You
Yeah.
know, like, what's the goal here? Are we trying to make these fantastical characters and stories look completely real? Or is it more about capturing the spirit of the animation?
Yeah, it's a tricky balance. You want to pay homage to the original, but also make it work in a live-action context.
Right, so that was their take on Moana. Then they moved on to the trailer for Jesus Revolution, which I have to admit I haven't seen.
Me neither, but I'm intrigued just hearing about it.
So apparently they described it as Jesus with magic-like powers.
Okay, that's interesting. A bit of a fantastical take on the story.
Right, and apparently the narrative structure, they said it's like based on a Charles Dickens story.
Dickens and Jesus. That's an unexpected combination.
It is, isn't it? And they had some really funny reactions to it. One of them was like, they should have gotten Keanu Reeves to play Jesus.
I can kind of see that, actually. Keanu has that serene, otherworldly quality about him.
Yeah, it's funny when you think about it. And they also mentioned that the animation style was, like, cheaply animated.
Oh, like a low-budget streaming series or something.
Yeah, something like that. So it sounds like visually it wasn't quite matching the seriousness of the subject matter, which they found kind of amusing.
It's funny how those unexpected contrasts can sometimes happen.
Right. And then, of course, they talked about the Masters of the Universe movie and the casting of Idris Elba as Man-in-Arms.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing some chatter about that online.
I'm sure you did. I mean, anytime there's a casting choice that deviates from, like, the classic look of a character, people get pretty vocal.
It's like a reflex these days. People get very attached to their childhood interpretations.
Exactly. And, the podcast hosts, they were kind of like, honestly, do we even care that much?
A valid question, really. Is it about the essence of the character or just clinging to a specific visual?
Right. And their take was that it often boils down to nostalgia.
Yeah, I can see that. If you grew up with a particular version of a character, you might be more resistant to change.
Yeah, so if you weren't a huge He-Man fan growing up, maybe it wouldn't be such a big deal.
Right, it wouldn't trigger that same sense of ownership or attachment.
But if He-Man was like your whole world, then you'd probably have a stronger opinion.
It's fascinating how these things tie into personal experiences.
It is, and then they talked about the live-action Lilo and Stitch trailer, which I actually haven't seen yet.
I saw it, and I have thoughts.
Oh, really? What did you think?
Well, I'm curious to hear what the podcast hosts had to say first.
Well, they were mainly focused on Stitch's appearance. One of them called him an abomination.
Ouch.
I know, right? But the other one thought he looked like a, quote, slightly more realistic koala.
Okay, that's a little more forgiving.
It is, but it shows you how differently people can react to these kinds of visual translations.
Makes sense. It's such a subjective thing.
Totally. And one of the hosts had this funny idea. Instead of Stitch, like, ruining classic Disney animation trailers, which he's done before.
Right, that's been a fun marketing thing.
He should do the same thing for live-action trailers.
That's actually really clever. I could see that working.
And they also like the idea of some subtle Moana references in the movie.
Oh, because of the shared Polynesian-inspired setting.
Exactly. Not big cameos or anything, just little Easter eggs.
I love those little details. It's a fun way to reward attentive viewers.
Right, now get ready for this. Because their reaction to the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 trailer was, well, it was pretty intense.
Uh-oh, they weren't fans.
Not really, and the main thing they were upset about was the return of Jim Carrey.
He's back as Robotnik. I thought they liked him in the first two movies.
He is, but that's not the issue. The problem is that he's not just playing Robotnik, he's also playing Gerald Robotnik.
Wait, Gerald Robotnik? Sonic's creator's grandfather?
Yes, and they were like, this makes no sense.
I'm trying to remember the lore, but yeah, wasn't Gerald supposed to be, like, dead?
Dead as a doornail. Especially after the whole ARK incident.
Okay, so that's a pretty big continuity error.
And they weren't just hung up on the fact that he was alive. They also felt like it completely ruined the potential for a good Shadow and Maria storyline.
Oh, yeah, that's a crucial part of Shadow's backstory. The relationship with Maria is really what shapes him.
Exactly, and they were worried that Jim Carrey would just be doing his same over-the-top Robotnik shtick, which wouldn't really fit with the more tragic and serious tone of that part of the Sonic universe.
So it's not just a plot hole, it's a tonal issue, too.
Right. They even speculated that maybe Jim Carrey just really wanted to be in the movie and insisted on having a bigger role, even if it meant playing two characters.
That's a bit cynical, but I guess anything's possible in Hollywood.
I know, right? But they did give credit to Keanu Reeves, who's voicing Shadow, for sounding genuinely enthusiastic about the project.
At least someone's excited about it.
Right. Though they did mention that there was this funny moment where Keanu seemed to misunderstand Shadow's powers.
Oh no, what did he say?
He referred to chaos control as teleportation, which isn't quite right.
Oops. Well, maybe he just got his wires crossed. I'm sure he'll do a great job regardless.
I hope so. They also mentioned some other things in the trailer, like Shadow having a gun, which is, I guess, not completely out of character.
Right. He's definitely more of an edgy character.
Yeah, and there was some speculation about whether we might see BioLizard or Metal Sonic, which would be cool.
Definitely some fan favorites there.
But overall, it sounds like the return of Jim Carrey, especially as Gerald Robotnik, really put a damper on their excitement for the movie.
That's understandable. Sometimes those casting choices can really throw you off.
Oh, and one last bit of movie news. They talked about the announcement of a Mighty Mouse movie being produced by Ryan Reynolds' company.
Mighty Mouse. Really?
I know, right? It was news to me too, and the hosts were just as surprised.
So they weren't like huge Mighty Mouse fans growing up.
Not really. They basically knew him from the catchphrase, "Here he comes to save the day."
That's about all I remember, too. It'll be interesting to see what they do with it.
Especially with Ryan Reynolds involved. I'm sure it'll have a certain, meta humor to it.
Yeah, you can't really escape that with him, can you?
So that was the big movie news they covered, but then they moved on to their movie review segments, which are always fun.
I love their reviews. They're always so honest and unfiltered.
So they had two segments. First, they did a rapid-fire round of movies they'd never seen before.
Oh, like blind reaction?
Pretty much. And first up was The Dark Crystal from 1982.
A classic.
Right? And they were really impressed by the puppetry. They called it a spooky Muppet movie, which I thought was a great description.
I can see that. It's definitely got a unique visual style.
Yeah, and they mentioned the Netflix prequel series, too.
Which I thought was pretty good, actually. It expanded on the world in an interesting way.
Then they talked about the 2006 Japanese live-action Death Note movie.
Interesting. I've heard mixed things about that one.
Yeah, their reactions were mixed, too. One of them thought it was decent, but the other one wasn't as impressed. They talked about how the movie kind of jumps right into the story with Kira already active, which is different from the manga and anime.
Right, skips over that whole origin story.
Yeah. And they also discussed how the movie changes Light's character a bit, making him more of a straight-up sociopath from the beginning.
Which, I mean, that's not really Light, is it? He's more complex than that.
Exactly, and the inclusion of Danny California by the Red Hot Chili Peppers on the soundtrack really threw them off.
Yeah, that's a weird choice. Not very fitting for a Japanese crime thriller.
It is, right. And then they got to Labyrinth, the 1986 movie with David Bowie.
Oh, I love that movie. Bowie is just mesmerizing in it.
One of the hosts admitted that they almost watched it by mistake, thinking it was The Dark Crystal.
Easy mistake to make. Both have puppets and fantasy elements.
They said they enjoyed the music, especially if you're a Bowie fan, but they ultimately preferred the story and plot of The Dark Crystal.
I can see that. The Dark Crystal is more of a straight-up fantasy epic, whereas Labyrinth is more whimsical and dreamlike.
Yeah, and I mentioned that Terry Jones from Monty Python co-wrote the initial draft, which I thought was interesting.
That explains the quirky humor.
Next up was Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey from 1991.
Excellent. One of my all-time favorite comedies.
This one seemed to be a hit with them, too. They loved all the cameos and the appearance of the band Primus.
That's so perfect. Primus fits the Bill and Ted vibe so well.
They did mention some, quote, upsetting-looking body horror. The evil robot versions of Bill and Ted.
Yeah, that part was a little creepy, even for Bill and Ted.
But overall, they thought it was a fun and entertaining sequel.
Agreed. It's a worthy follow-up to the original.
And then they moved on to The Fall Guy from 2024, starring Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt.
Oh, I actually saw that one. It was pretty entertaining.
One of the hosts had seen it too and said it was a fun action movie. They gave a shout out to the stunt performers, which is always nice.
Yeah, they definitely deserve more recognition. It's a tough job.
But they did think the whole premise of a stuntman being a superhero was a bit far-fetched.
It is a bit out there, but hey, it's a movie. You gotta suspend your disbelief sometimes.
True enough. Then came Monkey Bone from 2001, which I have to admit I've never even heard of.
Me neither. What's that one about?
So apparently it stars Brendan Fraser and Whoopi Goldberg as Death.
Okay, already sounds interesting.
It's about a cartoonist who falls into a coma, and his cartoon creation, Monkey Bone, steals his body.
Whoa, that's trippy.
And then there are all these other bizarre dream characters. They mentioned the stop-motion animation by Henry Selick, who's known for his work on Nightmare Before Christmas, and Coraline.
Oh, wow, so it's a visual treat then.
Apparently so, but they said the movie itself is generally unsuccessful and kind of weird, suggesting it might only appeal to a very specific audience.
So like a cult classic in the making.
Maybe. Then they got to Around the World in 80 Days from 2004, starring Steve Coogan and Jackie Chan.
Oh, I remember that one. I think I saw it on TV once.
They weren't particularly impressed. They said it strayed quite a bit from the original story, especially with the focus on air travel.
Yeah, I remember it being more of a slapstick comedy than a faithful adaptation.
Stop wasting your time on manually editing your videos. The secret AI tool will do the work for you. One of the best things about it is that it gives your video the potential to go viral. Visit this page, sign in, create a project by clicking on this button. Choose a video that you want to use. Click on the AI clip button. Wait for the magic. It is scanning through the video and looking for the parts that has the potential to go viral. Instead of editing the video by yourself, it does the work for you. It even generates headline and captions which fit your video. Another surprise is that they generate video description or social post for you to use. Once done, click Export to Post.
Sounds about right. Next was That Awkward Moment from 2014, which is a rom-com with Zac Efron and Michael B. Jordan.
I vaguely remember that one. Didn't really leave a lasting impression.
One of the hosts had seen it after a breakup and didn't enjoy it at all. They both agreed it was pretty forgettable, just a standard rom-com about three friends who promised to stay single.
Sometimes those rom-coms can blend together, especially if they stick to the formula.
Very true. And then they briefly mentioned Final Destination 5 from 2011.
Oh yeah, the one with the bridge collapse.
Exactly. They were mostly talking about the elaborate death sequences, which is what the franchise is known for.
Those are always so over the top and creative.
And one of the hosts said that the Vancouver setting where the bridge collapse happens was particularly unsettling for them because they were familiar with the location.
I can see that. It's always creepier when it's a place, you know.
They also touched on the whole skipping death concept, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it adds a whole new layer to the game of survival.
And finally, for their rapid fire round, they reviewed Yoga Hosers from 2016, which they described as a very bad Kevin Smith movie.
Oh no, not another one.
Apparently it's a spin-off of Tusk, which is already a pretty weird movie.
Yeah, Tusk was definitely out there.
And this one is even weirder. It's about these teenage convenience store clerks who battle miniature Nazi bratwurst clones.
What? Okay, that's just bizarre.
I know, right? And they mentioned there are prolonged musical numbers and even a cameo from Kevin Conroy, who's the voice of Batman.
So it's like Kevin Smith just going all out with the weirdness.
Pretty much. So that was their rapid fire round. Then they moved on to some longer form discussions of movies they either hadn't seen or had only seen partially.
Okay, so a bit more in-depth analysis.
Exactly. And first up was The Bad Guys from 2022, which is a DreamWorks animated heist movie.
Oh yeah, I saw that one with my kids. It was really good.
They both loved it. They praised the animation style and thought it was a fun and charming movie.
Agreed. The characters were really likable.
One of them compared it to the Sly Cooper video games, which is a good point.
Yeah, it has that same kind of heist vibe and a charismatic team of anti-heroes.
And they mentioned that there's a sequel coming out, so it must have been pretty successful.
I can't wait to see what they come up with next.
And then they revisited Death Note, this time talking about the 2017 American adaptation.
Oh boy, here we go.
and their thoughts were, well, let's just say they weren't fans.
I'm not surprised. That adaptation didn't really land with a lot of people.
Their main criticism was that it completely mischaracterized Light,
Yeah.
making him way too emotional and impulsive.
Yeah, Light is supposed to be cold and calculating, a brilliant manipulator. That's what makes him so fascinating.
Right. And they also thought the death sequences were illogical and the changes to the Death Note rules were unnecessary.
I remember feeling like they dumbed it down quite a bit.
They did mention that the actor who played L did a decent job, but overall, they felt like the movie was a huge missed opportunity.
It's a shame they had a chance to do something really special with that adaptation.
They even suggested that a more faithful TV series would have been a better approach.
I think a lot of fans would agree with that.
They also talked about The Room from 2003, which is, of course, infamous for being so bad it's good.
The Citizen Kane of bad movies, as they say.
Exactly. And they described it as nonsensical, but captivatingly bad,
Yeah.
full of terrible dialogue and bizarre plot points.
Like a train wreck you can't look away from.
And they talked about its cult following and how it's actually made a lot of money through fan screenings.
It's amazing how a movie that was initially a failure can become such a phenomenon.
It really is. Then they got into The Disaster Artist, both the book and the movie, which tell the story of the making of The Room.
Oh, that's a great movie. James Franco is hilarious as Tommy Wiseau.
They talked about the differences between the book, the movie, and what actually happened on set.
It's interesting how those different perspectives shape the narrative.
Right. And they pointed out that the movie tends to soften Tommy's portrayal a bit, making him more sympathetic.
Which is understandable, I guess. You don't want to completely demonize the guy, even if he made a really bad movie.
And then, brace yourself, they reviewed Sex and the City, the movie from 2008.
Oh no, not that one.
I know, right? And it sounds like they really hated it.
It wasn't exactly a critical darling.
They criticized the length, the storylines, the characters, everything.
What did they hate the most?
They specifically called out this long, agonizing musical number and Carrie's over-the-top reaction to Big getting cold feet.
Yeah, that was a bit much.
One of them even said they enjoyed The Room more, which is really saying something.
Wow, that's a scathing review.
It is. But then they moved on to something more upbeat, a musical review of The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals from 2018.
I've never heard of that one.
So it's about this world that's being taken over by singing zombies. And it's all thanks to aliens who are trying to promote global harmony through musical numbers.
Okay, that sounds really clever and original.
It does, doesn't it? And they said it's a great blend of horror and musical comedy.
I love those unexpected genre mashups.
That apparently it started as a college theater production, which you can actually watch for free on YouTube.
Oh, wow, I'll have to check that out.
They also expressed hope for a full-fledged movie adaptation, which I think would be fantastic.
It definitely has potential.
Then they did a rom-com review of Bridget Jones's Diary, The Edge of Reason, from 2004.
I haven't seen that one in ages. How did they like it?
Not really. They found it unfunny and the characters unlikable.
Yeah, I can see that. The sequel wasn't quite as charming as the first one.
And then finally, they got to an action movie review of Kill Bill, Volume 1 and 2.
Oh, those are classics. Tarantino at his finest.
Well, one of the hosts had only seen part of it while working at a movie theater, and they weren't that impressed.
Really? What didn't they like about it?
They thought the action wasn't that well shot or engaging, and they felt there was too much dialogue and not enough fighting.
Interesting. I guess it depends on what you're looking for in an action movie.
They did like some of the dialogue, but overall they found it boring, despite all the violence.
Jill, you can't please everyone.
And then, last but not least, they shared their thoughts on The Wild Robot from 2024, which is an animated movie.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one.
They both loved it. They said it was fantastic, beautiful, and cute, a movie that makes the heart smile.
That sounds lovely.
They didn't want to spoil anything, but they did mention that it's based on a book trilogy.
I might have to check that out. I'm always up for a good animated movie.
So, as you can see, the Spur of the Moment podcast covered a lot of ground in their latest episode.
They really did. It's impressive how much they managed to pack in.
And they brought up some really interesting points about adaptations, nostalgia, and what we look for in entertainment.
Absolutely. It makes you think about your own preferences and how you approach these different stories.
I know, it's given me a lot to think about, and I hope it has for you too.
Definitely. And it makes you wonder, what are you going to watch next?
That's a good question. Maybe something from the Spur of the Moment podcast list.
Or maybe something completely different. The possibilities are endless.
Well, That about wraps it up for this episode of the AI Analysis Podcast.
It's been a pleasure, as always.
And we'll be back next week with another deep dive into the world of entertainment.
Until then, happy watching, everyone.
See you next time.
So today's episode is sponsored by the Spur of the Moment podcast, everybody. Come join us every Saturday. We're going to do this. We're going to sit here. We're going to talk about the news. Time to talk about the Minecraft.
Okay.
It looks
So,
bad. We're going to talk about movies. That new Joker movie is apparently terrible, and I want to see it so badly because I hear it's awful. And we're going to make some jokes. We're going to have some laughs.
There's a lot of funny jokes in there. There's a lot of weird jokes in there. The Channing Tatum one will always make me laugh. Especially when you hear the behind the scenes stuff. Like when you hear the behind the scenes story of how they just phoned them up.
We're occasionally going to have other people along for the ride.
A really fun fact, though, is I learned last year that that Coraline was Leica and not Disney.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I can see why you would make that mistake. Yeah. Because it does seem like it's a different. And to be fair,
that would be a horrifying, terrible Disney movie.
It would be because and we're just gonna have a generally good time. George, do you have anything else you want to say about our podcast? Make people watch it.
We watch movies. Sometimes we watch shows, but we always have fun.
Here
On the spur. 3, 2, 1. On the spur of the podcast moment.
Yeah, we nailed it. Nailed it. Podcast.
Yeah.
It's Spur of the Moment podcast every Saturday. We nailed it.
You can expect awesome content like that.
We cut flawless promos every single week.